Hi-ho, Nation, Harry here again, and it is MSP Tech Talk Spring 2020, lecture number 4 of 6, and then we get a slight break, and we come back at you in June with the capstone lectures. As you'll recall, this is our academic series where we're content first and underwritten by generous supporters. A couple of highlights. The reason we're taking a week off is next week, starting at 4:20 p.m. Eastern each day, is our inaugural online cannabis technology conference. So if you want to see what that's about, we'll get you the link if you think you might like to participate in that. We've got 10 speakers, about 5 sessions, and we're double clicking down into that vertical. And it's a couple hours each afternoon. So that at 4:20 p.m. Eastern, 1:20 p.m. Pacific. And we spread it out over a few days so everybody could have time to get their workday done and so on. With that said, I am having internet trouble today, and I think Grace had a little bit of that going on as well. Don't know what's up, but I think in my case, it's some construction going on across a field. So if I drop, Jenny will assume the master of ceremony duties, and I mean no offense, but it's been a little bit choppy. So Jenny, since you're running the deck today for that very reason, let's do a next slide, please. We're just having too much fun with that thing called the internet. I'm telling you, that's actually part of the remote work conversation. Is bandwidth. And what do you know? Productivity. So when that slide comes up, it's the introduction slide. So Grace, go ahead and introduce yourself. The tribe has known you over the years, but it's been some time since we intersected with you. What's going on? What are you doing now?
So I am holed up down here in lovely Miami Beach, Florida. I am dialing in to this because my internet is worse than yours. I don't even know if I don't think you can see me because I don't even think I have enough internet for my video to work. And we've seen a lot of interesting stuff in the healthcare arena. Primarily, we were fortunate enough to have a client last year build a testing logistics platform for sending test kits to patients who are interested to know whether they had risk for age-related macular degenerative disease.
Okay.
And now they're repurposing that platform and using it for COVID testing logistics so that employers, hospitals, events people can order from a collection of various labs, different test types, and track all the logistics and the reporting through to the patient results. And now we're adding telehealth to that by integrating with Google Meet, which, by the way, is HIPAA compliant. So it's been pretty exciting, actually. We've seen an uptick in the need to automate, finally go digital. It's having to happen. It's not just a word anymore.
That, and you've always, I was saying offline, but you were engaging in remote work before it was fashionable. That's all you've done.
We've only been a virtual company since the beginning. So we're used to it. It hasn't really, my life hasn't changed that much other than I've started to cook,
Wow.
Which is a tragedy. It's a tragedy, I tell you.
Yeah, that is something. I remember your facility in New York City, and it had water bottles. But without further ado, we're back with Michael Frazier out of the Seattle area with Refractor. So Michael, introduce yourself and then brag on yourself again. I've done a couple interviews with you, but you won a DoD contract. Quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks, Harry. So Mike Frazier, co-founder of Refactor. We're also doing some cool stuff in automation around DevSecOps type stuff and kind of software-defined IT as code as people are getting into the public cloud. And we're also seeing an uptick in all kinds of different organizations from cybersecurity vendors who are wanting to get more adoption of their stuff in the cloud, with the uptick of people starting to want to spin more stuff up in the public cloud due to all what's going on currently, as well as to what you were saying, Harry, the DoD. So we recently won an Air Force SBIR Phase 1 contract to start the process to see about the DoD utilizing, or starting with the Air Force and then the broader DoD, being able to leverage our technology and be able to help the warfighters out to get into this, DevSecOps and IT as code type of stuff. And actually yesterday, just had a book come out. I'm chapter 31 in the book. All Day DevOps published a book that has a bunch of thought leaders across DevOps and DevSecOps, including myself, but also the Chief Software Officer of the Air Force, Nicholas Chalene. He's also in there as well. So there's some really cool stuff in there, and it's a free ebook out there as well. So that was published out yesterday.
Hey, if you don't mind, can you get that link over to Jenny, and she'll include it in the thank you note for tomorrow? I'd like to see it myself. And
Okay. Yeah.
And folks, if you want to track Michael Frazier's success, go to our YouTube channel, SMB Nation, on YouTube. And I think, Mike, we've done a handful of interviews on that and other topics. Jenny, next slide, please. And folks, if you join late, I'm talking fast because my internet's choppy, Grace's internet's choppy. It couldn't be a better conversation about productivity and remote work when we're living it. So I want to just check off on what I call the obvious and the oblivious. You are not here with your precious time to receive a lecture on online conferencing. It's like, got it. Okay, I know what it is, but I want to get everyone's opinion on a couple of things. And Grace, I forgot Slack, and I know you love Slack, forgive me, so let's make that a bullet point as well. But these are some productivity and communications tools. Again, I know you know this, your MSPs. I want to tell you my experience and something that I've bumped into, the whole Zooming phenomena. Now, we're actually using GoToWebinar today, and my bad, and I'll talk about that. But what I'm doing once a week on Fridays is I have volunteered to do virtual field trips to a 40-acre llama ranch in Austin, Texas. And I'm actually back in Seattle for the summer before I return to Austin. But it's been fascinating. And again, we're talking remote work. And number one, a lot of you guys don't even think EDU. So you're so darn caught up in corporate and business, you're missing the bigger opportunity, in my humble opinion. We had a speech earlier in the series on the National Christina Foundation that will accept the hardware that's being refreshed and retired. So, and we're seeing this play out big time in EDU, where the schools are either providing new hardware or the families are, and it's creating abundance of devices that are then donated to the National Christina Foundation. See lecture number 2 in our series. And they're actually coming over to pick up all my junk next week from mini storage. But the point is, that's my llama lecture in Cypress, Texas last Friday. And it was absolutely fascinating to see the behavioral aspects. There's some compliance issues. You'll see the kids' names are blocked out. There were some, the behavioral issues. The lower right, that gentleman was going off camera, and then he put a doll of a llama up there. But I couldn't get better data points about what remote work looks like in the new than just doing it. And tomorrow I'm lecturing to a group of 5th graders. So these were, tomorrow's kindergartners in Monroe, Washington, and then we've done Anchorage, Alaska. So Zooming. Teams, here's my experience with Teams. It is, it just feels like it takes 5 or 10 minutes to get everybody logged on, and then we have a 30-minute meeting and we've consumed a bunch of the time. I'm not a big fan of Microsoft and Telcom. GoToMeeting is the oblivious. I feel it's a little bit like Constant Contact. They got in early, they were a category leader, and they haven't innovated like Zoom. Folks, go around the horn. Grace, if you want to add anything from the peanut gallery, you do a lot of development work on Slack. Give me a minute on Slack.
So I like Google Meet. I like Slack. I think Google Meet, by the way, has come a long way, and I think I just mentioned that with our client that's integrating a telehealth platform. We looked at telehealth platforms versus just doing an integration with Google Meet and Google Calendar, and it's just a much smarter, cleaner way to go with much more sort of flexibility and a better user experience. And then Slack, of course, I tend to use whatever communication tool I happen to be in. So if I'm chatting in Slack, I'll hit the phone on Slack and use that one. If I've in Google Hangouts, I'll just throw a Meet, or Zoom is usually for people that are sort of Microsoft people.
Yeah.
We're Google people.
No, I know you and I have had a spirited debate for well over a decade about that. But hey, Mike, 1 minute on just the obvious and the oblivious. What say you on the different platforms?
Yeah, so I actually use all these probably except Skype, and the key is kind of what Grace said is using whatever the client has internally. We use Zoom and Teams. I have to say there's little things out there that it's kind of funny they come to the forefront now because everybody's working from home so much. So being able to do like virtual backgrounds is interesting, which platforms do and which ones don't. And being able to have little features like that where people are like, hey, I want to start customizing, just like we've always done on our desktops. All of a sudden people want to customize their backgrounds and stuff. And then the last piece is security. So obviously security has been at the forefront of some of the issues with Zoom, and so some of these other players like WebEx get in and say, hey, we got a more secure platform. We had we're Cisco or whatever. And so understanding like the implications of the kind of information that you're sharing and making sure, and this goes all the way up to like the DoD, where they, there was a mandate put out that they didn't want people using, but they're trying to figure that out as well. And I think there's actually a Zoom Fed-ramped Zoom product out there that people didn't really know about. So they were using the consumer version or the commercial version out there. So it's interesting, but security has definitely been kind of brought up to the forefront, and all the platforms and companies that are very concerned about sharing any information in their meetings are now thinking about like what they need to do to make sure that either they're secure themselves or look for other products to use as well.
All right, Jenny, next slide, please. Folks, if you joined us, bear with us. I think to some degree we're all experiencing a little bit of internet isms today. So bear with us. We're going to have this conversation, and what I want you to think about, the panelists and the audience, is again, we're talking productivity and collaboration in the new normal, and I want to think beyond just the singular corporate employee. She's given a laptop, maybe a second monitor and a printer, and goes home. Big whoop. I already talked to you about EDU as maybe one of the hidden jewels, but I want to take it up another layer and talk about platforms. Okay, platforms are central to collaboration and productivity. So this is where the two panelists get to tell their story. So I'll tell you what, Michael, you go first. Reintroduce us to Refractor and what you do, and if you want to have Jenny make you a presenter and you want to do a little show and tell, you have my permission, my friend.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, so we've been a cloud first company at Refactor. We built what we were doing originally as being 100% cloud focused, being able to leverage the platform that we have to be able to build out automation in all the major public cloud providers. And we're seeing a major uptick in organizations that are trying to figure out how to get their infrastructure into the public cloud so that they can just kind of future-proof themselves for this work from home type of setup, which I've been a proponent of for forever. And our company is actually 100% remote as well. And we look at it as an opportunity to not only hire the best talent out there wherever they exist, but also helping our customers understand what they need to do and how they can go about being able to set up things from a remote standpoint. And then from our platform standpoint, it is platform as a service. It's completely hosted in the public cloud. And so our goal was to make sure that, it's super easy to get up and running on what we're doing, and also being able to enable collaboration. What we find is that if their products out there themselves have to have collaboration built into them, so that different teams or different types of or people in an organization can work together. I mean, our stuff is primarily geared towards automation and building out automation, but there's all kinds of other tools out there for collaboration too, and they kind of tie in as well. So we have people, hey, I want to tie into my ticketing system, I want to tie into, brought up earlier, Slack or Teams, but being able to have integration points between other products that they're using for collaboration is critical for organizations that are looking to not only figure out how they're going to continue on to support the remote workforce, but also really using this as a catalyst to kind of get out of an area of complacency and really looking at how to modernize the approach to how businesses do business and what that means from a technical perspective. And so a lot of organizations have put the public cloud into their strategy. They've really been looking at how they can leverage, security tools and different security vendors. But at the end of the day, it's a complete paradigm change to not only get into the public cloud, but get into this thing I call IT as code, where everything becomes software defined. And so because of that, it requires a completely new way of thinking, and also enrolling everybody into collaborating and not creating silos for yourself. Because even if you're automating, a lot of organizations have 1, 2, 3 people in them that do most of that work, and so getting other people, other technical folks involved in that process is critical, not only to get solutions start building solutions in the public cloud, but just generally across everything as a service, so that everything can become a agile approach and iterative approach to how you would deliver solutions to customers. And did you want to weigh in here at all, Grace? Looks like Harry dropped.
Yeah, so we are similarly inclined, cloud first application platform company, and we started off our business thinking that we were going to be sort of a lights out platform, and that third parties would come in and build applications using our tool. It's all browser based. There's no SDKs to download or anything like that. What we've become, though, is sort of the outsourced CTO, CIO for the company, and in that role, really taking clients from soup to nuts in terms of building whatever automation solutions they need. And we've also become that role for startups. So I think I mentioned our client Visible Genomics, who are a startup offering AMD testing direct to patients, and now we have another client in that space called Adama Diagnostics, who are now going to be offering direct to patient COVID testing. And we have, clients that are doing vinyl manufacturing, clients that are doing, offering different sorts of automation solutions to their clients. And so we've become a product development house of sorts. And if I could figure out how to share my screen, I would do it, just to give you an example of the diversity. Because what we've noticed is that clients can't really buy things off the shelf anymore and have them help differentiate them. So in order to go to market with a differentiated solution, people are having to really do some custom work, and we can normally do that faster than people even imagine. Okay, now I can't share my screen because then I'd have to restart my computer. So
Well, yeah. So and one of the things that you hone in on too is what you guys do is you consider a low code, no code. What's the approach there, Grace?
we are low code. So our platform allows for JavaScript to create fine-grained automation. So, for example, you can build your data model and your domain model using a graphical user interface. But when it comes to things like connecting up an integration, we have an endpoints framework, but you do need some JavaScript to tell it what data you want. You know, do you want to pull? Are you pulling events from the other API? All of those sorts of things are done with a little bit of JavaScript, but it's very well organized so that once you okay, so I think I can share my screen now. Once you how do I share my screen? Jenny, help. Jenny.
You should have just gotten a request. Did you get a request from me?
Yeah, I got it. Okay, here we go. Now, let's see. I'm showing my main screen. Let's go here. Here we go. Okay, so I will show you. So this is a screen that a developer would log into. And so we really are a developer platform. We have just been the primary developers on it ourselves. So every developer gets to,
I think your screen is frozen. At least it's frozen on my end.
are you seeing this?
Yeah,
okay.
Now it finally caught up. Yep.
Okay, so I'll just use this one as an example. So this is the Demos app, and this is just an application that we put together to show the different user interfaces that we offer. So these are dashboard widgets that are depicting data that are sitting in other sort of data containers here, like a company's contacts, right? So this is just here's a cards view, right? These are all default views that we create out of the box. The way these applications are built is using our online tool, which is a builder. And this is where, when you hire us, we put 1 developer, 2 developers, 3 developers, however fast people want to go. We put them to work in here. And in this way, they're able to quickly build these applications because you're starting with the data model. You're not picking your database, you're not picking all these technologies, you're literally going in here and creating data entities. So for example, that company's entity that you saw here, and all of the various fields in this company entity, and subviews, all of that, those are defined here. So here are the fields. And so you can literally go in here and start very quickly modeling your domain. We define a lot sort of at the field level to make it easier, and then all the way through to display options and permissions. And this is what gives us our compliance and our HIPAA compliance, right? We can restrict permissions very succinctly to the exact people. And there are other features in the platform that do that as well, in terms of, we have a field type called sensitive, and those fields values are never spit out in logs that developers might see, for example. So that's the data entities piece. And then the integrations, we have all these integrations are open source. So if you want to take an endpoint and make it more robust, or you want to change something about it, you can just check it out, create your own endpoint, and register it. And so this is how we attach ourselves to other solutions, and including things like blockchain. So we can interact with a blockchain if people happen to have a blockchain part of their business model. And then this is how we add the fine-grained automation with our listeners. And this is where you start getting into a little bit of code. But when you have, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask Chris, so when you create all of this, where does the application end up living once you've built it out, iterated on it, it's now in a format that you want to deliver it and stand it up somewhere?
So It's auto-created, so as soon as you do all of this, you push the changes, and it's in production. We also support development, staging, and production, and it's deployed at Google. So that's all automated. Cool. Yeah. So we also have a monitoring tool so that you can see, your application performance. We have done work with very large data sets that come in via, FTP, right, through old ugly systems. And so we had to build very robust jobs processing in order to make sure, okay, an import failed. Why did it fail? Where are the logs for that? And so, and how long are these jobs taking? So we've done, quite a lot on the and monitoring the APIs and monitoring the database side and entities. So all in all, what you get is sort of an outsourced development team, but with one developer, I can do the work of 4. I can get actual applications out the door much faster than ever before. And so, I like to tell the story of how did Uber get started? Well, Uber got started by stitching together Google Maps, Twilio, and Braintree for payments. They didn't go write a whole custom platform that did everything itself. They integrated everything, and that's our approach. And then our next iteration of this is we're supporting public-facing pages so that you can embed a custom view on your website. And so that's going to give us the ability to, what we've done here is these catalog items, for example, are sitting in Slinger, and these images that you see here are sitting in Slinger. So as soon as, if people want to offer more catalogs, they just upload a new image to Slinger, and it'll come out on their custom CPQ page on Squarespace. So really taking the whole notion of, data-driven websites and dynamic data to a new level, in a custom level that almost, a company of any size could afford.
So what's some stuff that you've done with MSPs? I saw you had some Autotask integrations.
So for Autotask, we actually have an endpoint. So if you wanted to create, we have an several Autotask endpoints. Autotask, hold on one second. Endpoint manager and Autotask endpoint management, and Autotask user. All 3 of those. We have a template application that you can, if you're a developer, or you can have us do it. You could create a new application that has a Slack bot. It's actually a Slack bot application. So I don't have any templates available, but if you sign up for a developer, then yes, there is an Autotask Slack bot template available, and that will put some simple commands in Autotask and synchronize with your Autotask instance in Slack. So for $99 a month, if you had a JavaScript developer, you could just go have them sign up, create this Autotask bot. There's good instructions, and we're in the Autotask directory of how to configure it and how to make changes in it, and you can literally have Slack talk to Autotask however you wanted it to.
Very cool. And then if you wanted to make your own custom one from, say, ConnectWise Manage or others, you can make your own custom.
Correct. You can make your own ConnectWise endpoint.
Very cool.
So that way, I like the idea. In working with Autotask, we discovered that the Autotask API is a nightmare. It's old. The deployment model of Autotask caused a lot of complexity, but I like the idea of using Slinger as sort of the integration hub, because once we can get a normalized view of the data in and out of Autotask, it's much easier for Slinger to connect with any other tool that you want to use versus trying to get Autotask to connect to it directly. And so that way, you know, MSPs can sort of pick the best of breed new stuff that comes out there, because it's not you know, it's not rational to believe that Datto is always going to have the best of everything, or ConnectWise is always going to connect to the best of everything. You're going to change stuff out over time, and we can be a very flexible platform to help people do that.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to think about, and this, we have the same approach in what we're doing, is that you know, there's this future state of IT, or even current state of IT, where you have to do some development work to be able to, you know, do, say, your integrations, or you want to do something custom.
Yep.
And so platforms like this that help to kind of bridge the gap there are not only vital to what MSPs can do, but I feel like they're also how an MSP can maintain competitive edge on anything that they think of that could help them with customers. Because that's the current conundrum I see. It's the same thing on the stuff we're doing, you know, generally around DevSecOps, which is funny because people think DevSecOps, they think about just software delivery, right? And there's this more holistic view of everything in IT becomes code, software defined. And as it's becoming software defined, you know, whether it's I'm deploying to the public cloud, whether it's I want to configure, you know, deploy a configuration, it's everything that goes beyond what they're used to. And it's kind of, you know, and it created the same thing where, you know, to the example of ConnectWise Manage or Autotask, is that those tools are fine and you can work with them and configure them. But what you find with those products is that there's customizations or integration points that you may want to be able to control yourself. And then there's other things beyond that that those platforms don't support at all, where you're having to just figure out, okay, well, if I can tie into the API, that's cool. But now I need to go transform the data, pop it into another system, be able to then do something else, you know, and there's other products out there like say Zapier, but the problem is they're not geared towards the technical folks to be able to get the end results you're wanting. It's more about the consumer, but very much more about the consumer. And hey, here's the consumer products I want to chain together. So a lot of the products out there, or the fact that, to your point, like with Autotask, the API is, you know, antiquated. It's old school. It's still a SOAP API, if I recall, is it not? But it's
and by the way, first figure out where the deployment is. You know, like it's a nightmare. So yeah, I totally agree, and that's where people come to us. They're like, we need something differentiated, you know, and there's no way to get that without a little complexity. And so that's, you know,
I was going to say, and that's where you can't sacrifice functionality. So you know, it's this constant thing that everybody's like, hey, I want the easy button, and you're like, well, okay, but if I abstract away all of the power underneath so you can't touch it, and I only allow you, and I make this particular opinion to you, and this is all you can do, you've ostracized a lot of potential opportunities out there because of the fact that then you have something that's so focused and so much of a point solution, especially when it comes to development like this, or DevOps or DevSecOps, and really just automation in general. It's a problem that exists out there. And what I see too, just like, you know, you support JavaScript natively, right? But at the very top level, you start out with from a UI, and you get down, and if you need to do snippets of JavaScript, you can. And I think, you know, from a standpoint of, you know, just like what we're doing, the same thing, except focused on existing DevOps and security tools that people are using out there for things like infrastructure as code. Well, the issue right now with a lot of MSPs is that they're so used to things from a UI perspective, and I'm sure everybody on this webinar can relate, that, you know, it's easy to go into a portal, or it's easy to go into a UI and kind of start out with things, but all of a sudden you're like, well, I want to repeat this, I want to do this over and over again, or I want to iterate on this. And so just like you have the capability of being able to make changes and iterate in your platform, Grace, it's the same thing just generally that I see out there. Is like everything has to be done in a pipelining, iterative approach. And
exactly,
you're developing an application or you're building a software-defined solution that has some infrastructure, has some security tools that I'm trying to programmatically now maybe do a security scan. Maybe I'm trying to actually do some remediation. Maybe everything is now just SaaS-based, so I'm just hitting it via the API. But it should take the exact same approach. There should be nothing different between iterating on an application you're building in your platform or building a software-defined solution that I'm deploying into Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. It shouldn't matter. It should be the same approach and the same thought process. And I think that a lot of MSP is in general out there, and everybody here can relate, and I've been in this space for a long time, is that it's very difficult to change the mentality of how you do things because most MSPs aren't development shops. So they don't even get the process here. And so understanding kind of what's coming on the forefront and really trying to figure out how to embrace that. And I talk to MSPs on a weekly basis, and it's interesting because I'm starting to see MSPs really start getting how they need to be able to change and going, hey, can I automate this or can I automate that? And I think to your point about Autotask's API, it's just inherently a problem across all the vendors in the MSP space, is that the innovation that's happening is still around the existing products and the existing structure and how MSPs have operated for the last 20 years. And so you have to break out of this mentality that we just want everything just to be super simple and super easy because I'm sorry, but the public cloud is not super easy. Application development is not super easy, but there are ways to make it easier. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I totally agree. So this is our development approach. We know, we are very disciplined. We put our stories in here. We have a weekly call. What'd you do last week? What do you want to do this week? We can move our cards around and put them in different orders if we need to. And that's, we do that even for this app itself because we're building we built this app to manage our whole business on, right? It does everything. It's got our front end billing, the time tracking is integrated with Slack. It's got all of our, our management. It's got our HIPAA compliance stuff in here, who's on which project, what permissions do they all have. So the whole thing. And did we sit down and write a big fat requirements document? No. We just start building, and then you start using, and then you keep going. And so we are sort of like software with a service because our customers never really stop building. And that's just we become up their IT, the sort of the app dev portion of their budget in lock, but the cool thing is, just to your point, the architecture is going to stop you from doing something stupid in an application. So you're never going to wind up with some big spaghetti code custom mess, At worst, if you get 2 new developers and you're like, hey, I'm going to staff my own team, at worst, you're going to have to go figure out what these libraries say, and maybe some code in the listeners. But they're not going to sit there and go, oh my God, what's, the shin bone's connected to the ear over here. What's going on?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. And I think that the key to all of this is, being able to leverage the expertise too of the people that are building these platforms up, because the goal is to not only try to make it easier, but also, to your point, make it a repeatable process that you're not going to become your own worst enemy. It's the same thing that we say, like, hey, if I'm going to start out with some of the tools we support, like Red Hat Ansible, I would never expect somebody just to take that tool and immediately apply to their customers' infrastructure. I would say start small, figure out the tools. Once you can understand the tool, then you can start leveraging out there. So but it's also a difference between, hey, if they engage with you and you can help them out at the very beginning, just like we do with professional service on the front end, we can say, hey, we can help guide you. If you have no context to, like in your platform, app development, or no context to DevOps or DevSecOps processes, then you have to at least start small and understand how the tools and the platform works, or in your case, at least fundamentally how, you would structure an application and what you're looking to try to accomplish from the application. But at the same time, understanding that the whole premise of the platform is to give you everything. So it's not like, oh, well, I can use this tool here and this tool here. You really want one single pane of glass that will allow for you to get the end result you're looking for. And in our case, it's the ability to have the automation that you're looking for to be able to build a particular solution or perform a particular set of automation tasks that you want to be able to do. But like I was saying, it's no different than, hey, I want to start small on an app and I iterate on it. It's the same agile methodology and process that you have to apply in order to be able to even start out, right? And that's the whole premise of agile in general, right? Working code over documentation. That's one of the core principles, because you don't want to over document things to death and plan things out, because you also learn things in the process as you're creating. And so
three-quarters of what we create, we learn in the process.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So that's kind of my mantra out there, is you just have to start. And once you start, it becomes one of those, it becomes a habit, and where that's the process that you're going through. That's how you're going about doing things. I mean, to be fair to the MSP community, it took the developer world, a little bit of time to catch on to agile. And then it took another, we're 10 years into DevOps now with what was originally called agile infrastructure. And so, it's one of those things that takes a while for an industry to embrace. And then all of a sudden it becomes, it has a snowball effect and everybody's in on it. But it also requires for vendors and other companies to get onto that bandwagon too. And so when I talk to, MSPs out there that are super frustrated, a good example is, the Autotask API, but other ones like Sophos, where they're like, hey, I want to automate my Sophos firewalls, but I can't, because the only way to really do this thing programmatically is to have to leverage the Sophos, what's it called, Central, or whatever the centralized console it is. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I want to do this other automation in this other system. Well, sorry, you can't do that. And then you try to build your own automation around it. And not only is it so arduous, but you find out it's the how much time does it take me to do a manual task versus the level of effort to automate this, so then I can have this repeatable. But all of a sudden you realize, well, maybe the automation is actually not worth it, because the vendor requires me to do 5 different steps or whatever it is manually. And by the time I get to the automation, it's only, 20 or 30% valuable now to me versus, being 70, 80% of the process. And so you kind of have to balance out what it is. And so at this point, it's interesting, because trying to talk to vendors to get them on the board with, like, hey, you need to improve your APIs. You need to be able to support the existing tools that are out there. And some other vendors do it. So it just depends on the vendor. So a good example of that is like Fortinet, who has a bunch of content out there with, Terraform and Ansible and so on. But unfortunately, just getting a Git repo and trying to run that stuff on your own as an MSP is not going to really work. And so you have to look for other products and platforms out there that can help you with that. And the same thing with, software development, like what you're doing, Grace, because of the fact that, it's tough to be like, well, I'm just going to start out and start writing out my Node.js or JavaScript, application, and that's fine. But if you don't even have any context to how you would start out, it's very difficult to build anything net new without having some understanding of what you're trying to accomplish and build, and then also having something you can start from, like you guys have built.
Well, and so, as I think about MSPs and I think about people's nervousness about technology in general, new customers are always nervous because everybody's had a bad experience with custom work. But then once they trust you, then you're like, hey, everything technical from, how am I going to get my Amazon Alexa to talk to my app? It starts coming at you. And I would be the MSP that would go out and staff a little team of JavaScript people, stick them on this platform and tell them to build stuff for me. Because like for not a lot of money, you can source JavaScript people anywhere in the world and have them, build some really creative stuff that would be a true differentiator. The level of automation you can get, because we went the developer route versus the no-code route. The no-code route, typically, you're going to run into some sort of a snag somewhere. It's doing something that the no-code route won't let you do. But even like moving a card from left to right, can kick off a whole stream of notifications, a different automation, update the dashboard views, anything sort of that you can conceive of from an automation perspective can be built here without breaking the bank. So like we have free developer accounts. We have a $99 developer account that gives you access to the templates. And then to Slinger Pro, we price based on resource, so app instances, database instances, etc. So we look sort of like infrastructure as a service.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're like you on that standpoint too, low code on the front end, but the back end. So we have a drag and drop builder, but the actual builder itself is based off of a YAML definition. So if you want to get in there and actually update and edit that, you can. And then we support all of the tools that we have, just like you support JavaScript natively. Same thing for us. And so, because our goal is that, hey, if I build an Ansible play, if I want to use something from a vendor is a good point, right? So I go out there and get the Git repo out there that has this content. Maybe I want to spin up a Fortinet FortiGate. Cool. I need a way to be able to not only pull in that Git repo to reuse that existing content, but I also need a way to be able to run that stuff just like I would in a CI/CD pipeline. And it seems like you guys have that functionality built in, which is super cool. But for us, we have to support the tools to run them natively as well. Because if you want to run something like Ansible, and that's actually, Ansible is a tool a lot of vendors use. Ansible is a tool out there that I get a lot of requests out there about, hey, how can we get rid of our RMM? Can we use Ansible? And it's like, wait, well, okay, you have to think about the level of impact of what that's doing for you and how you can leverage new tools. So Ansible would be a great replacement for the automation piece of RMM, but at the same time, have to realize like what you need to automate. What are the outcomes that you're looking for? What additional value are you trying to get out of it? And what other things can you do? And so a lot of times what pops up is, hey, I want to be able to, run some security benchmark, maybe like Center for Internet Security. I want to run that against my boxes. And right now it's not really feasible to do with my RMM product. And so it becomes one of those things where if you have a place that you could start that adds a ton of value to what you can provide to your customer, whether you're developing an application or you're trying to figure out how to, modernize from a automation standpoint in general, it really comes down to being able to increase the amount of value that you have for your customer. And then also looking at other ways to automate versus the traditional process that organizations do. Because of the fact that, typical automation, say in RMM, is done just with scripting usually. And all of a sudden it's like, well, hey, maybe I want to automate this particular, network device, but in conjunction with that, I also want to tie into Slack and I want to open up a ConnectWise ticket, that type of stuff, where it's like, I need to do the business process or more like the IT ops side of the house that I'm already currently used to doing as an MSP. But I also want to do these other things that I really have no way of doing other than, going out there and searching for, okay, is there a tool that I can, run a security benchmark? Is there, how do I apply this? Is there a way, how do I integrate and tie this into these other products? And so we're kind of in the same boat as you are from that standpoint, just a little bit different focus, Grace, from a standpoint of, it's the same thing though, from at the end of the day, where we're working on different integration points. We're working with different tools, and we have to be able to make sure that we can answer the current requirements of customers now. But the other piece to all this is organizations are going to much more cloud native. They're looking at other stuff. And even if it hasn't trickled down to the smaller MSPs, from the very top DoD and the stuff we're doing with the Air Force to large enterprise customers, we're seeing that there's this inherent need to want to simplify and centralize the overall automation process, and enrolling other technical folks, maybe, the system admin folks, maybe, some more of the ops folks, the security folks that then can work with the DevOps and the developers. And so, obviously the larger the organization, the more teams that they have, but as that stuff starts to trickle down to the smaller organizations, it becomes one of those things where, you really have to figure out, what do I want to build? What's the solution? And I need to start embracing the fact that I have to start using these tools and technologies. You know how few organizations, even now MSPs, are using, say, Azure, but using ARM templates or building in HashiCorp Terraform. They're in the portal like building or not at all. And so, it's one of those things, just like with software development, where it seems like it's super ominous and horribly difficult to do. But if you really hone in on what it's solving for you and the increased efficiencies that you get out of it, you'll start realizing what it is. But I keep going back to, the fact, and it's just like with the integration points you have in here, it's the same thing that I harp on in this industry, is that vendors have to get on board with not only creating content and helping to get their partners into this future state, but it's also has to be in formats that they can actually consume, not just, hey, I built this automation content, I pushed it out, and go ahead and pull it down and use it for yourself. And unfortunately, that's not a good starting point. Just like if there was a repo with some JavaScript code and you were like, well,
you're right.
Import this in
Right.
here, you can start here.
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, that's not a good starting point for me. I don't even know what,
Right.
I don't even know how I start here.
Well, we conceived of this so that the platform is your architect. It's your CTO, the platform itself. Because now every time I integrate with something, I go add an endpoint, I write a little code, and I coordinate it with whatever other listeners I might have going. We also auto-generate an API, a published API, add a URL. So if you manage to get all your endpoints under one roof, you could literally publish an API and sell access to one API that covered all the other APIs. You know what I mean? So
you custom generate the open API spec. That's pretty cool.
Yep. So as soon as you go create a new data model, hit the save button and push it, this API doc updates.
Yeah, that's very cool and very helpful.
Yeah. So now, because if you're not doing business this way, if you're not doing business in the API economy, we are rapidly approaching the day that you're gone. Especially now, you look on. If you're not online, you're gone. There are plenty of places that have learned a very tough lesson in these last 3 months.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I would say, yeah, if anything, we've kind of cut out. You can no longer be complacent as an organization. You really have to think about ways to adapt. The last time this happened was, the financial, recession, meltdown, whatever you want to call it. And what we found that there was a start pushing in the direction that we're in, but I feel like there's definitely more of a catalyst now and a bigger impact. So organizations are realizing, like, wait a minute, I can't do business as usual and think that it's going to I can continue on this way. I have to adapt and overcome. It's something that we learned. I learned when I was active duty in the Air Force is, you have to adapt and overcome every situation, and you need to do it in a very agile approach, not in a, oh, well, this whole thing just happened, I'm going to completely revamp my business. Well, that's not realistic either. So it becomes one of those things where it's like, you do need to start to strategize, look at what you can change in your organization, look at ways to automate, look at ways to build, integration points to help streamline processes that are costing you not just money, but inability to maybe bring on net new customers, bring on net new products and services, be able to provide things that your customers are wanting now, like being able to get into, the public cloud, being able to provide security products and services to them quicker. It's all about agility at the end of the day. I mean, that's what, I hate the term digital transformation, but the whole premise of it is to increase the agility of the organization so that it's not just a business thing, it's everything, technical, business, everything is all inclusive in this super agile, iterative approach to everything. And the only way we get there is having everything become software, and it's getting there. And so if you don't adapt, you will not survive this transformation of the entire industry, because it's happening and it's starting to accelerate.
Well, it looks like we chewed up an hour.
Yeah, it's been great, Grace. Well, yeah, awesome stuff you're working on. Next time I'll I'll demo our stuff, but I figured it was cool to kind of walk through what you're doing. Awesome stuff
appreciate it.
as always.
Anybody want to reach out directly? Grace at slinger.io. Happy to answer any questions.
Yep, and same thing with me. It's Mike at refactor, refactr.it. Yes, there's no last vowel in our name.
We're anti-vowel, you and I.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we dropped. Yeah, see, there's some there's some synergy here in our. It starts out with the naming of our company. So,
All right. Well, Jenny, thanks to you. Thanks to the now missing Mr. Brelsford.
yeah, hopefully get his internet back.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for everything, and we will see you soon.
Sounds good.
Happy
Thanks.
trails.
Stay safe.
Bye.